Good evening. If you're a TED Talk addict, like I am, you surely know about Ken Robinson, right? Ken Robinson speaks about the legend in education that we all believe in. That legend says, if you get good diplomas, you'll get a good life. And because we all believe in this legend, we tend to focus on school performance and focus on diplomas. And when we focus on, the more we focus on diplomas, the more we standardize education. And the more we standardize education, the more children we leave behind. But there is something you and I can do about that, and I'll come back to it in a moment. But first of all, let me tell you how happy I feel to be speaking in front of you tonight, and to be speaking in front of such an international audience. So please raise your hand if you have ever moved to a different country, moved and worked. Wow, okay, it's even more than what I thought. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you have experienced that before. You know that kind of feeling that it's sometimes very hard to adjust to the hosting country, the hosting culture? Have you experienced that? Yes, okay, me too. I mean, for me, for example, living in Japan and having to go strictly by the rules, whatever happens, for French people, I can tell you it's tough, right? You know how French people like to play with the rules and adjust the rules. And more recently, living in Canada, I realized that I had a glossary very limited, very narrow, and that I had to enlarge my vocabulary. You know, words like awesome, great, brilliant are not part of the French vocabulary. So I had to push myself to enlarge my vocabulary and recalibrate my scale for feedback. So I think it's very difficult for us because we are adults. But it's very easy for children. I've seen that with my two daughters. When we were living abroad, they went to international schools, and they were surrounded mostly by international kids. People coming from everywhere. People speaking different languages, eating different foods, celebrating different festivals, and that was their norm. When we came back to France, they went to French school, and they were surrounded mostly by French kids. And I remember my oldest one, she was 8 at that time, she came back home one day, and she told us, you know, that's strange. There is this boy in my class, he's called Nao. He doesn't know where he's from. Nao's dad was Japanese, Nao's mom was German. He was born in England and raised in France. So, of course, it was a tricky question for him. But the tricky thing here, and the interesting point here, is that how easy and quickly she could adjust from one norm to another. And actually, neuroscience have proved that, have explained that. What they have understood is that brain is not set as birth, like what we believed before, but sets on environment. So if you place a child in a particular environment, his brain will set accordingly. And if you change the environment, then the brain will simply reset. For us adults, because we have been exposed to the same environment for a longer period of time, our connection gets stronger. And because they are stronger, they become more difficult to adjust. But still, what neuroscience says is that they can still be reset. Okay, it requires more energy, but it can be reset. And these are actually the two keys to the global learning crisis that I was talking about before. The first one is how important the environment is to the child's development. The second is that our brain, our adult brain, can reset. But first, let's talk about the environment and the importance of environment. Maria Montessori understood the importance of environment way before neuroscience proved it. And what she believed is that each child is born with a natural motivation to learn. So the only thing that we have to do is simply to set the environment that will maintain this motivation. And actually, in Montessori classes, it works damn well. I've seen that myself. And because of this environment, emotional environment, physical environment, or the task that we offer to the children, children are very motivated to learn, and they can actually easily learn great stuff. I've seen that in the Montessori School of Tokyo. I've seen children working on multiplication and division only aged 6 or 7. So now you might be wondering, well, what kind of environment do we have to set to maintain this motivation? Well, this is exactly the question that some researchers in Canada have tried to answer. And they found it. They found a very interesting thing, that motivation only relies on 2 things. And I'm very happy to be here tonight and to share this with you, because it's a finding that is very powerful. So it needs to be known widely. So the first thing that motivation relies on is the consideration for the task. How does the child consider the task that he is given? Does he feel like this task is related to a center of interest? Is it related to real world, real life? Does he think like he has any control over the result? You know, I'm sure you know this feeling that sometimes whatever energy you put into something, you know that the result will still be bad, right? You know that feeling, yeah? I know that when I'm cooking, actually. My family is very sad about it, but that's okay. So the consideration for the task and how the child actually will engage in the task. When we were living in India, my daughter was asked by a school to run a project. In a team of 3, they had to select a global issue to see how the global issue impacted their daily life and take action over this issue. So with the 2 teammates, they decided to work on new animal rights and work on a stray dog issue in Bangalore. What they have chosen to do is to meet with different associations that were dealing with this issue. They selected one, they organized a lottery at school, and with the money they raised, they purchased a surgery lamp for this association, who was actually sterilizing the dogs. So now they have the names on the wall next to the lamp in the surgery room of this association in India. And the girls, I forgot to mention, they were only 10 years old. They were very motivated to do it and very engaged because they had the chance to do it, because their environment at that time offered the chance to do this kind of task. The second thing that motivation relies on is the self-esteem. What about your self-esteem? Is it high? Is it low? Why do you think it's high or low? What do you think impacted your self-esteem development? For a child, he builds his self-esteem, on the feedback that he receives from the environment, from the parents, from the family, from the teachers, from friends, from peers. And I'm engaged in education in many ways. I run a big project that I could talk about in another talk, actually. I would need 45 minutes to talk about this other project in Lyon. But last year, what I decided to do is to run a TEDx club in a public high school. Although it was late at night, although it was extra work, although it was difficult because it was only in English, we had 7 students to enroll the club. 7 students who wanted to share something meaningful to them. And here we had the first ingredient of the equation. Out of the 7 was Noema. She's on the left part of the picture here. Noema is this kind of girl, very talkative, who takes a lot of space, in the group. But when it came to share personal ideas and stand up and speak alone in front of others, that was a totally different idea. And we realized that her extroverted behavior was actually hiding a very low self-confidence. So she would always pretend to have headache or stomachache, and she would not stand up and try, at least, to practice. So what we've done is that we have simply been very patient with her. And what I did is that I kept telling her that I trusted her to come up with something, that I was truly sure that she will come up with something good. And only 2 weeks before the event, before the big day, she finally put her ID down. And on the D-Day, despite of a high fever that she developed on that day, she still came to the conference and she delivered a great talk. After the talk, she sent me an SMS to tell me how proud she felt and how grateful she felt. Well, of course, my first reaction was to cry. But then I realized that, again, it proved that whenever you truly trust the young one's capacity, whenever you give them the consideration that they deserve, they can truly explore their potential. So if you were wondering what kind of environment we need to set to maintain this kind of natural motivation, this is simply the answer to your question. Engaging our young ones in interesting tasks and raising their self-esteem by the feedback that we will give them. This is how we will maintain the natural motivation to learn. And as you can see, this equation works in many different kind of fields. It works for work, it works for sports, it works for art. If you are a manager, for example, I'm pretty sure that you can apply this formula with your team members and raise their motivation to work. But if I come back on education, when I was talking about all the children that we leave behind, the very sad thing about this equation is that the children who will leave school will turn towards anyone who will give them a slight consideration. And sometimes these people will be well-intended, but sometimes they won't. And we know too well how it ends. So if we want to change the world, and if we want to build a better world, we need to start raising our children motivated to learn. And we need to build the environment that will help maintaining this motivation. But it's very hard to do because it's a big change of culture. Because we will have to change from a culture of diploma to a culture of motivation. And as we mentioned before, our brain is very difficult to reset. That's why we cannot let teachers and schools be the only one to drive this change. You and I must help them. It will take a lot of energy, but we can still reset. Jean-Jacques Rousseau said, "We are good by nature, but corrupted by society." I agree to say that society can shape us, but I disagree to say that it could be only for the worse. It's up to us to decide and to act consciously together to build the environment that they deserve and to change that statement into a new one. We are good by nature and empowered by our society. Thank you.